right, folks. So I'm a machine designer. My mother was a mathematician. My father was a physicist. I am a lab experiment or a study break. And over the years, I don't know, 130 patents, a bunch of companies. I'm an academic, but I try to focus on doing real things. And in the context of designing and making real machines, either with students to start companies or with companies, it helps me understand the fundamental physical stuff that allows me to then study that as an academic and then publish generalizations. So that's the way I operate. I grew up in Redondo Beach in California, so I'm used to everything and everybody of every type. It's the gumball machine of the planet. But as you can tell by the beard, I also live up in the woods. My wife and I own a big chunk of land in New Hampshire. And I'm worried the planet is dying, and I can see it because the trees are changing over the years. I can see the march of stuff. So you've heard in the press people talking about sometimes this Green New Deal on the far left Democrats, and the far right Republicans say, how are you going to pay for it? And so I think we can take sadness and make it into happiness if we just think a little different. That's the message. Okay, now, why do we need to do this? Because there's all kinds of humans who live in low-lying parts of the world, and they feed off of others, and they contribute nothing. And people say we need to save, the UN says we need to save all these people, like people at MIT, academics. So we've got to remember, it's not just some people in Bangladesh who live on the floodplain who are going to die. It's like 90% of the population lives within some 10 miles of the ocean. And so a lot of really rich people are going to get screwed. And you can't say, well, I'll just move to higher elevations because I live at a higher elevation and I've got guns, lots of guns. And you're only going to come and take my high ground. Okay, so that's that sad dynamic we live in, but we can solve it, okay? And here's how. So one of the most important movies of all time, Ghostbusters, where he says, everything's going to hell, dogs and cats living together, but see, dogs and cats can live together very nicely, okay? In earlier talks, you saw the earth was painted as it's all going to fry. But no. So we can do this, okay? And the answer is blowing in the wind, in the sunshine, and we've heard some earlier talks earlier. This is how we're going to do it. So in 2001, in October, my friend Shaker McGee and another guy, El Sayed from Toronto and then Rutgers, we had a materials and design conference in Egypt in November of 2001, 2 months after 9/11. And we had 150 people who were supposed to show up for the conference. Only like 5 or 6 did, and I was the only white guy because everyone else was afraid they were going to get blown up. But I don't care about anything. I travel everywhere. I'm a scuba diver, right? I dive with sharks. And at this conference, it was great because instead of 150 people, only 6 people, so we had plenty of time to each present our ideas. And we realized the following. When you go back in history and you look at like the cost of the Vietnam War, it cost about $1 trillion to $2 trillion, depending on how you do your accounting. So at the time I wrote an article and I work along the government, it said, don't go to war in 9/11. I don't care what your politics are, because you're going to spend 10 to 20 years and a couple of $1 trillion. And what better way to savage those evil people who you hate than take away their business by making oil irrelevant? Because at that time, for $5 a watt, we could have built, for that $4 a watt, 500 gigawatts of CO2-free 24/7 electric power. Think about it. We spent 20 years blowing shit up, accomplishing nothing, when we could have had today 500 gigawatts of 24/7 electric power for that $2 trillion. So there are many different religions in the world, and I think they're all got wonderful stuff, even if you don't believe in a religion. So I think everyone on the planet should ask their prophet, whether it's Jesus or Muhammad, peace be with him, whoever you are, what would you do with the next $2 trillion? Okay? Because there's a lot of good wars and shit brewing. And I'm an old guy, so I can use 4-letter words like stuff. Okay? So we can save the planet. And I have an acronym for it. We don't have to be victims of silly, human, intransigent thinking logic. So you can make the acronym, okay? So here's what we're going to do. Energy is the key to everything. We heard some great talks this morning, so I won't belabor the prices. We've also heard this morning that you got to have a carbon tax because you got to get the cost down. Well, I kind of believe in that. The real thing to get the cost down are symbiotic relationships, I believe. So some of that's like Dan Nocera was talking this morning about, we engineer bacteria to suck in CO2, but then to create fertilizer. That's how you really get the cost down. And notice how he pointed out, that's a true thing where you can be carbon negative, is when you find these symbiotic relationships. My wife and I have a small farm. We raise sheep, chickens, all kinds of stuff. And we don't spray anything on any of our fruit trees, because we have lots of chickens that roam free and they eat all the bugs. And then we eat the eggs. So we don't need chemicals. Regardless of chemicals are good or bad for you, it's irrelevant. You don't need them if you think symbiotically, okay? So I'm going to go through some of these ways we can do this symbiotically with giant energy machines and have cheaper energy. Now, I also, as a machine designer, I start companies and stuff, ones that actually work, not just the flash in the pan ones. You got to look at the money. Where's it going to pay for it? And how are you going to do it from an industrial capacity? And let's look at history. Before World War II, there was a vast infrastructure in the United States. And there was a book about a Japanese general named Yamamoto. Yamamoto studied, I think it was at Harvard actually. And Yamamoto said to the Japanese leadership, do not go to war with the United States. They will kick our asses, because they have such a vast industrial everything, and they will convert it to war machines from refrigerators. And they didn't listen to them. They thought with their egos. And what did we do? In a space of about 5 to 6 years, we converted making automobiles and refrigerators to making a fantastic war machine. Okay, the Japanese Zero could kick the hell out of 5 of our airplanes. No problem, we made 10. So in the end, we won, just by sheer industrial might. Now, watch this. In the world today, your worst thing as a supplier is to not have enough. So you always have a little bit of extra built in. There's an automobile capacity of 20 million cars a year. And they only make about 16. They have an overcapacity of about 4. The weight of a car is about 1.5 tons. A 5 megawatt wind turbine needs about 500 tons of steel and associated stuff. That means you need 333 automobiles to make a 5 megawatt wind turbine at a 40% capacity factor, and the big offshore ones are 50. And the 24/7 capacity of this 5 megawatt nameplate is 2 megawatts. Where am I going with this? Take US electric demand of 600 gigawatts. If we want to make 50% of it powered by wind, which we can, that means we need 300 gigawatts of wind, or 150,000 wind turbines, or 50 million cars equivalent. 50 million cars equivalent, and we have 4 million cars a year overcapacity. We could build all the wind turbines we need in a little over a decade with the existing automotive capacity. And that means the capacity to produce the steel, the electronics, everything. So don't tell me, politician, that it can't be done. I say fertilizer, which actually means bullshit if you translate. Now, let's talk about the money. So we just take 50% of this overcapacity, and we have 2 million cars a year. Okay, so fine, 25 years, we can have 50% of all US all US electric needs by wind. How are you going to pay for it? Well, if we do 6,000 wind turbines a year, it costs $10 million installed cost of the turbine plus the interconnect. Okay, that's $60 billion. Well, the US annual defense budget is $700 billion a year to blow shit up. So if you take 9% of the defense budget and you make it the offense budget, we want to not have to be reliant on foreign energy sources in order to protect the United States. Boom, there it is right there. Okay, so it's very easy to do if people just think different. You don't have to be Republican or Democrat, you just have to think. Both sides aren't thinking. Okay, now, a little bit of more. Oh, why is it cutting off the top? Rats. Anyway, the US wind industry is a very large employer. It employs more manufacturing and construction than any other power system. Okay? and I won't go reading all through these, but wind is all over the whole country. If you're a politician of any flavor, you cannot say you don't support wind. There is an order of magnitude more wind jobs than coal jobs, period. Okay? And it has the lowest impact on wildlife of any power generation. It kills birds. Cats kill 10 times as many birds as our wind turbines. Get rid of all the cats. And wind turbine and skyscrapers, they're the nastiest. Knock down all the buildings. Okay? So less carbon, we'll have more birds. Now, how do you do this? You can't do it, you say. Well, it's new machines. History says machines. The reason we have all these high fashions is because of the loom. And what made high fashion really take off was the computer-controlled loom. So machinery, you tell me a problem, I'll design a machine to fix it. That's what I do. Okay? So always, we have enough good technology now that we can solve the planet problems. We heard about it this morning. That doesn't mean stop looking. Keep inventing, but as we also heard from the guy from Shell, climate will not wait for us to find the magic technology. We got to work now. Only issue is cost. So how are we going to do it? Here's an example. This is wind turbines today, which are pretty good, and the tower is built in pieces. Here's where wind turbines need to go in the future. Here's why. If we take Maine, that's that funny little state on the northeast, you can only put these 80-meter towers on the ridges because they have these trees that are in the way. So Maine has 6 gigawatts of wind potential by putting the turbines where you can. That's these little baby turbines, these little 3 to 5 megawatt things on an 80-meter pole, because that's the highest pole you can economically build. The reason is the poles are made in factories and they have to go underneath bridges. If you can make a 150-meter tower with a 5 megawatt turbine, the state of Maine has 60 gigawatts of potential. That's 24/7 potential. We can make this now for the same price as this. How? So the key is, whenever you're doing anything, you don't have to be a machine designer. What I want you to do to work with me or any other machine designer is let's understand the physics together. The physics is that these poles, when you build them, you can't have them vibrating in the wind. They have to be stiff. So you identify the top functional requirement that the machine has to accomplish, and what is the dominant physics? The dominant physics is the stiffness. The stiffness is a function of the diameter of the can, these are called cans, to the third power times the thickness of the steel. The strength of the tower, how hard you can push before it falls over, is a function of the diameter squared times the thickness. The weight of the tower is a function of the diameter times the thickness. Money or cost is only a function of weight. So what I look for is I look for these nonlinear relationships as a fundamental way to identify where and what I should design. So I want to design a big diameter, thin tube. So I can design it, but I cannot make it. How do you make this thing in the woods of Maine? Can't. Okay, which means I have to speed up. Which means that I design a machine to do it. We build the machine on the site, and we start a company, and we're in Colorado, and we're making them now, and it works. Okay? The next thing after the wind turbine pole is going to be the blades. Someone's got to figure out how to do the blades. People are working, they haven't figured it out. The last thing is minerals. All this stuff, all these people need minerals. You can't unless you want to go to war with China over the Congo, which is stupid because one of us will win, but in 50 years, there's no more minerals in the Congo anyway, so why do we bother blowing it up? And the answer is the ocean. We figured out with our chemist friends came up with the polymers. We figured out how to strand the polymers on these chains of balls, and we can suck up all the cobalt, all the lithium, all the vanadium, anything you want from the ocean economically because of this new machine for deploying the polymer. And I'll skip the chemistry and blah. And the secret is you basically put your polymer on the inside of a wiffle ball, and then you run on your offshore turbine these strands running up and down like a continuous chain. And the funny thing is for a 5 megawatt wind turbine, it will harvest the equivalent of 5 megawatts per year of yellow cake for your nuclear reactor, for Yokopo. And this is Maha. This was her doctoral thesis, and we tested in the waters off of a cape here. It works, and the economics actually work. That was a 1/10 scale model. This is if you take existing oil wells in the Gulf of Mexico that are in deep enough water to deploy to get the cobalt. We just published on this. It's on the paper. We can harvest enough cobalt, like in a year or two, to make 5 million Teslas a year. We don't have to go and fight with people over the Congo. We got all the cobalt we want economically right here by sucking it out of the water. And I would maintain that in the South China Sea, where you have the Yangtze River dump, except you built the Three Gorges Dam, which is stopping all the silt now, but I think there's enough stuff in there. What happens is you have rain, it leaches the minerals go in the rivers flow to the warm waters of the ocean, which is where we should deploy to suck up the minerals without having to go halfway across the world to destroy forests and blow each other up. Next thing is, and then you're probably going to kick me off, you can store all the hydropower you want by pumping seawater. It's easy. You can do it in Lanai. You can do it in California, Mexico, Sudan, Morocco, UAE, Northern Red Sea, and Iran. If Iranians were smart, they would say to the world, you got to let me say this, because I'm going to have world peace here. Iran has some of the best location on the Caspian Sea for pump storage hydro. Iran could go back to its Persian roots. Remember the Hanging Gardens of Babylon? And Iran should be the world leader in renewable energy and energy storage and show the world how to do it and take over the world by being nice and renewable energy oriented. So they've got a couple of my students, one of them is in Pakistan, one of them is from Iran. We're working on this paper, and she's making me go away.
No. I mixed up. Apparently, you have the two first speakers have a little bit more time.
Oh.
So I apologize for rushing you, and so you have a little bit more time to conclude, and then we can take a few questions.
But I'm Ukrainian, not Russian, so that makes sense. Okay. Okay, you got that. We got cobalt. The way this works is really that simple. Pumped hydro, people don't want because you have a dam, but they think of a dam pumped hydro like a giant lake. That's because they want to collect enough water in a month to last all year. The metric to think about is if you're going to have renewable energy sources and you want to have 24/7 power from them, the battery you need 1 square kilometer of reservoir area, 30 meters deep, at a height above sea level of 600 meters to store enough energy for 1 million people. So in Los Angeles, which is about 10 million people in the greater LA area, you need one lake, 3 kilometers by, little over 3 kilometers by 3 kilometers, so about a 13-kilometer perimeter, which is only a third of a marathon. And I can store all the electric power that's needed to make all of Los Angeles totally based on wind and solar. I don't need lithium ion. I don't need any of that junk. And all I need to do it is I pump the excess energy that I have here up in the form of water, and it runs out. And what I'm showing is here by co-locating it with reverse osmosis, the other factoid is the amount of water I need to store for you to hold your energy is 20 times the amount of water, seawater I need in order to make you all the fresh water. So in other words, I need to store 20 cubic meters of water per person per day, but I only need 1 cubic meter of seawater reverse osmosis to make you your 500 liters. So that water that's rushing out to make electricity for you now will take out the brine that is normally toxic, dilute it so much I don't worry about when I pee out the brine of hurting the fish. Right? And now this huge flow of water in and out, I will also then put offshore fish and shellfish farms because the huge flow of water keeps them clean. I no longer need the antibiotics to treat the fish because they no longer just sit in stagnant water. So you see, by building food and fuel together, each will cost less than if they're separate. And we work out the numbers. And I'll give the slides, or you can email me. We've published on this in the spreadsheets and stuff. The numbers really work out well. So you can do this in Hawaii. And in Southern California, beautiful places here in the state forests, which are no longer forests, by the way, because they all burned. So whatever critical, delicate animals that were there that the liberals say, you can't put anything, you hurt the stand, they're all dead anyway. They've been burned to the ground. I'd like to see how many people I can offend evenly. Now, the better place is San Clemente. Remember that other wonderful president who was accused of obstructing justice, Mr. Nixon? Remember him, San Clemente? Anybody old enough to remember him? That'd be the perfect place here in the state national forests. And if I was the current president, in order to piss off all the liberals in LA, I would go and build this system here and kill all the snail darters or whatever's in there. I don't care. I'm going to give all these people, you want your renewable power? Fine. I'm going to put a giant pumped hydro there. And if you don't want to do either one of those, my friends I'm working with in Mexico, down in Ensenada and Tijuana, has some of the best pumped hydro storage anywhere on the planet, equivalent to Iran. And with all the money we're going to make selling the gringos power and fresh water, we're going to build a wall here to keep all the gringos out, to keep them north. I had some good times drinking wine with my friends down there in Ensenada planning this. And this is going to go out, this is happening. We're moving forward on these. So you see, I have no respect for politics or silly people who don't believe in physics, because all this is physics and economics based. Anyway, Morocco, the UAE, Northern Red Sea, worked with our friends in Israel and Jordan on siting. This one in Jordan may go through. And then, of course, we're working on the paper to show our Iranian friends how to do it. You can't see the title, but this is Offshore Wind and Aquaculture. A good friend of mine, Bella Buck in Germany, has published extensively on offshore wind, particularly in the North Sea, because you can't afford to do offshore wind so much, and you can't really afford to do offshore fish farms because the fish farms require heavy structures to hold them against the storms. But if you combine fish farming with offshore wind, the cost of both is lowered then. So offshore wind, and the interesting thing is when you size an offshore turbine to provide power for 2,000 homes, you can actually then farm enough fish to meet the protein needs of those same 2,000 homes, all in the same size package. So I think we need to have a planetary grand challenge. Let's take Shanghai. Let's take Boston, or Houston, and say, which city can have all of its electric power and its protein grown offshore? Let's have a fun competition, something like that, as opposed to who can blow each other up first. That's a silly one. So the moral of the story is, the future is ours. The money is simple. It's the political will that's required only. And no one has to have a suffering on their quality of life. You don't have to have a huge carbon tax. You just have to take 10 to 20% of your military budget and put it in. Same people who build weapons, they can build the wind turbines. No problem. No one has to lose profit. No one has to lose a job. Just do something useful with the money for a change. And I took this picture from a dive boat off the coast of Baja California, talking to my friends about those places we were talking about. Okay, now, because I have to, this afternoon's talk, I have to go chair another session. There was a little screw up on scheduling. I want to just briefly show the key slides from that. How much time do I have? 3.9 minutes?
Now you have 7 minutes.
Oh, good.
We're going to have a couple of questions.
Okay, so I'll be quick. So what my friends in Israel, Professor Carney and Professor Doran and Mark Graham was a doctoral student of mine. We're looking at, whenever you talk about energy, people say, well, what's the levelized cost of the electricity? What's the cost? What's the cost? What's the cost? And we feel that we have to include what's the societal cost also, because you could go put solar panels, but if you have to mow down a forest to put in solar panels, that's not a good idea. Right? So we think this is a fundamental thing, a new area that needs to be happening. And because cost is not just the dollars per kilowatt hour raw, it's the dollars to make that kilowatt hour that's very important. So a couple of these slides I had before, we call it the SIF, the societal impact factor. And some of my friends said, people will never pay. But my wife and I, we make lots of money. I make lots of money. You can tell by Victoria's Secret on that model you see often. And so we take our discretionary income and we invest it only in green, renewable investment things. There's a basic retirement fund. Yeah, Shell, Exxon, kill the planet, great, no problem. But our discretionary income we invest only this way, like this article is. So we look for this. And so we want to see how do you express the monetary increase or decrease of a cost associated with what it does to society. And there's negative SIFs, air pollution, all these bad things. And there's positive ones. We will build a system but you'll have good employment, energy security, maybe energy independence. And where those will come in, let me go. Oh, so for example, biofuels. My European friends, you bastards. In the UK, made her wake up. You guys want to burn biomass. So to make yourself feel good, you come to New Hampshire and you pay people to do what's called a haircut in the forest. My forestry friend used to just select the big trees that were ready to sell to my Chinese friends for really good timber logs. Now you come in with these machines and they go, and they take everything and they go, they chip it up and they put it on a boat and they send it overseas so people can burn it and feel good about having biomass. Yeah. Or the Europeans, they say, you Americans are so evil, bad. So they go over to Indonesia and that part of the world and they kill the rainforest in order to have oil, palm oil, to feel good about themselves. And I say, silly. See, the societal impact factor would actually take into account what you are doing in total. And that's what's missing from almost all of these energy calculations these days. So now that I've managed to insult and make everyone mad uniformly, they can all be calm. That's one of my goals here. Anyway, this is how we define the levelized cost of energy now. This is how it needs to be. My next equation. All of these factors that we now do have to have this factor of the societal impact factor. So when you look at the cost of the fuel for how you're generating electricity, you have to consider the fact that that cost of that natural gas means that I'm fracking in Pennsylvania and people are getting lousy water. That has to be included in the cost of natural gas. You hear natural gas is wonderful. It kind of is, unless you happen to live near where they're fracking. Okay, so that has to go in there. So that's the essence of what we're doing. Now, we published a paper in Applied Energy recently. We call it Black into Green. Big, gotta have an acronym. That, for example, if you're producing oil in North Dakota and you took 10% of your gross revenue and instead of paying a carbon tax, you invested it in wind turbines or photovoltaics, in 40 years, all the carbon you would have offset from pumping that oil and all the carbon that was created by using that oil will now have been gone into renewables. That means you're no longer burning coal, for example, and you'll now be a net zero carbon. Read the article. The numbers were absolutely fascinating. So big oil companies, you can have a carbon tax put on you, or you can do a self-imposed, I'm going to invest some of my income for the future. And the numbers worked out really well. So that was the message. And my friend Mark writes rap. So he has a song called Gas Guzzler. He has another song called World First. And that is we got to get the kids talking about it. It means we got to communicate in their language, not the old guy. I'm dead. I'll be dead soon. Doesn't matter. The young generation, and we got to use the popular press. So it's not just scientific articles. You got to get TV shows, everything else out there. So my STEM friend, I'm kind of leading into. It's not only STEM. I guess it's education, but also the communication part of STEM. Very important. Okay, any questions? I think I'm on time.
Thank you. Sorry for rushing you up. Let's see, there are questions here. You have a question?
Yeah. Well, the first one is, for the wind turbine, big ones. Well, there's many places Morocco and California. Nothing here on the east coast of the U.S. What I heard, I'm from the UK, but not very familiar with here. But I heard that the wind is potentially good resources in Boston. But possibly one of the things is the hurricanes. What's the kind of factors or parameters it takes to design them 150 meters high?
Right. So those the designs that are coming out do the winds. This is one more. This is a reason why they should actually go in Maine on the mountain ridges, not out in the ocean, because the hurricane, within 50 miles or so of the coast, everything drops way down. So that's the debate or the discussion. If you put it out on the open water, the wind is better. You have a higher capacity factor, but now you have to design them more expensively. We can design them, no problem. It's just the cost goes up because you have the higher wind speed. But it's all physics, very doable. And it all goes into the cost function. I would put everything on land first. A lot of people on land don't want the wind turbines. In Maine, most of Maine is vast forests owned by the paper companies, and the people are desperate for jobs, and where they're looking at doing wind would be welcome. That was a great question, yeah.
Any other questions? No, well, yeah.
Just a short question. This idea of societal impact, I think is really, really interesting and should be incorporated. Let's say if I were to go sort of off the map, how difficult do you think it would be to incorporate something like a PIF, a political impact factor, and have like a big cost comparing these energies, taking into account how much opposition, perhaps in certain regions, certain countries, they might have?
I think that is a fantastic question. This whole SIF, the impact factor of like just pure costing that we do now, is only about a year or so old. I mean, people have been talking about it in general. And so my friends and I, we decided to package it. And this is the article we published. And that's great. I think you're right. There should be, I don't know if PIF is part of SIF or whatever. That has to be done. And so one of the conclusions we had in the paper, discussion points, is this is a new area. Psychologists, it's going to take a good team of political scientists, psychologists to figure out what is the impact factor. But we have to do it, because I think we've been ignoring it, and we need to put a number on it. And then I think the politicians will listen, because right now they don't. They just say, well, the wind doesn't always blow and the sun doesn't always shine, so if you want to toast your muffins, burn coal. We don't have to use a toaster pretty soon. You just put the muffin outside.
I have actually two questions.
Yes.
For the first part of your talk, I like very much your idea of the symbiotic relationships, very much in line with the type of research I do. And I also believe that if you make the economic equation in this synergetic way, then of course you get a completely different situation. But, yeah, but you are very critical about the position and of the policymakers. Could we think that also the research community is not being strong enough in conveying the opportunities at hand? Or what would you recommend for breaking this, what you put as more or less like an impasse with the policymakers?
I'm so happy you asked that. Beautiful, perfect. That's one of the reasons why I sometimes use enhanced metaphorical language. Like I say, shit, which actually is silly human intransigent thinking. It's not the other shit you're thinking about. And I put up a slide of Iran can be a world leader in peace and lead the world into the future with renewables because they're just so perfectly situated. And I bring up this thing about the defense budget, that if you're Lockheed Martin, you don't have to lose a defense contract. We'll give you a defense contract to make a giant wind turbine. So no one has to lose who is currently making big money. We just want you to make something a little different, to save the planet, so maybe we'll have something worth fighting over in 100 years. And I think the problem with academics are we don't scream loud enough and we say, well, the data indicates that humans might be. And then the one politician who wants to make money says, see that scientist over there? That guy? He said it only might be. And they ignore the other 99.9999 of them. So we need to uniformly all, and any engineer or scientist says, well, you're not really sure. We need to just beat the shit out of him and throw him out the door and not give him any funding or anything. Arr. Because we don't. We're just way too passive. And it's stupid.
What would you do if you were sitting in the role of the policymaker in terms of actually making sure, because the opposition is also there. The reason why we have established structures that need to be transformed and changed. What would you do if you were sitting in that position?
okay, so for example, this is why I put up that slide about wind generates more jobs. The wind industry has not been good about that. And then we have an article on this thing also, and that take a coal mining community, okay? People want to mine coal. They love coal. Coal is it's a fantastic thing, just don't burn it. So there's a company, Ramaco, pardon? Well, or it's a fantastic molecule. Your chemist will tell you it's a brilliant precursor to all the chemicals that we now use. And we should be going from coal to carbon fiber directly in order to make wind turbine blades. So let's mine it and do something more useful with it. It doesn't mean that, no, you miners have to suffer for the rest of the country. You miners keep mining, but we're going to do something better with it than burn it. In other words, the message I'm trying to get out is that we don't have to fight. You see, the problem is that we're fighting, and everybody seems to think in order for me to win, you have to lose. That's the fundamental problem. What I'm saying is, no. If we just think opposite of what we do, everybody could be happy. It's really silly. Like, again, defense. You go ahead and spend $700 billion on defense. Just take $200 billion of that and make it offense, because the best defense is a good offense. I used to do martial arts, still kind of do. And you come at me with a strike, I'll deflect it, but I'm not just going to wait for the next strike. I'm going to carry you through and then take you down on the ground and break your ribs. So, a good offense to make sure you don't get back up to hit me. Anybody plays martial arts out there, you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. Well, we have a lot in common. Any more questions? Yeah, one more question.
Just Alice, are you familiar with the beyond LCOE, usual LCOE calculation? DOE now is putting together what they call the beyond LCOE. They're looking at it from a resiliency factor, but it's not a bad idea to reach out to them and include this social aspect of it.
Okay, yeah. Do you know anybody in particular? I'll just Google and
see a link on it. I have it here,
Okay, please do.
Yeah. So that's the new initiative in DOE was beyond LCOE, so that's it.
I'll write it down as soon as I stand. Yeah, great. I'm the big optimist, by the way. I think everybody can have fun and we can save the planet and it can all be good. We just have to get a little bit different thinking. Yes, ma'am.
Well, time's actually up, so if it's a very brief question.
Yeah, I just wanted to share that in terms of communication to government, in India we are following this, we are developing certain communication tools which are integrated models to show the impact of various trajectories and which are put in public domain. So that sort of thing also works really well when we have to come in. So it's just just those numbers of GDP and employment which would make the difference to
That's really heartening to hear that. Maybe can you email me that and then
Thank you for this.
we're starting to write a paper on all this.
And
Maybe we
the
can
impact
collaborate.
factor we should take in the coffee break, because that's also an area I find is important. That's related also to the symbiotic aspect of the value added, of course.
Yeah. And I'll be here through 3:40. It's just at 3:40. I apologize. I have to go chair the other session.
Well, thank you.